"Show me how white people love," asked the young Apache woman, and the rancher taught her to love. The morning sun rose slowly over the wide, dusty plains of the southwest. Its light stretched across the rolling hills, turning the earth into shades of gold and brown. On the edge of the open land, a small ranch sat quietly, surrounded by wooden fences and the soft sounds of animals stirring for the day. Chickens clucked near the barn, and the faint bray of a donkey echoed from the corral. The ranch itself was simple, but cared for. Weathered wood, worn by years of wind and sun, told stories of hard work and quiet endurance. It was the kind of place where life moved with patience, each day blending into the next with steady rhythms of feeding, cleaning, and tending the land. From the nearby desert, a young Apache woman watched the ranch from a distance. She was new to this area, and the life she saw here was very different from what she had grown up with. Her dark eyes were curious, observing how the rancher moved, how he spoke to his animals, and how he treated even the smallest creatures on his land. She had grown up in her own community, where life was connected to the land and traditions passed down through generations. Love in her world was often shown through protection, care, and storytelling. But here, she wondered, love seemed to be expressed differently. She wanted to understand it, to see if it was something that could be learned and felt across cultures. As the young woman moved closer to the ranch, careful to remain unseen, she noticed the rancher working outside the barn. He was a middle-aged man with broad shoulders, strong arms, and hands hardened by years of labor. His face was calm, lined with subtle creases that spoke of both hardship and experience. There was a quiet dignity in the way he worked. He did not rush. He fed the animals in the morning with care, ensuring that each one had enough food and water. He brushed the horses, his hands moving slowly and gently over their coats, speaking to them softly, as though they could understand every word. The young Apache woman could not help but be drawn to this calm presence. She wondered what made a person like him love so patiently. In her community, love was often loud and visible, shown through gestures or words that everyone could see. But here, she sensed something different, a kind of love that did not demand recognition, a love that existed quietly in actions rather than in words. After watching for a while, she decided to step closer. The rancher noticed her presence almost immediately, though he did not show surprise. His eyes met hers, steady and calm, and for a moment there was silence between them. She did not speak at first, unsure of how to begin, but her curiosity was strong. Finally, she asked, her voice soft and hesitant, "Show me how white people love." The words hung in the air, and the rancher paused. He had never been asked such a question before. It was unusual, unexpected, and yet there was a sincerity in her tone that caught his attention. He studied her for a moment, trying to understand not just her words, but the meaning behind them. He could see that she was not asking about romance or fleeting feelings. She wanted to understand something deeper, something that could teach her about the human heart, about care and kindness, about how people express love through life itself. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he invited her to stay and watch, to learn not through explanations, but through observation. He began with the simplest acts, allowing her to see how he cared for every creature and every task on the ranch. He showed her how he fed the chickens, making sure none were left hungry, how he carefully carried water to the animals in the corral, and how he tended to the horses, brushing and speaking to them with a gentle patience that was almost musical in its rhythm. The young woman listened and watched with growing interest. She noticed that love, as he demonstrated it, was not loud or boastful. It was in the small details, the way he wiped dust from a horse's mane, the way he cleaned the barn without complaint, the way he paused to make sure each animal was safe before moving on to the next task. She began to understand that this was a form of love rooted in attention and responsibility, a love that required time, care, and consistency. Over the next few days, she returned often to the ranch, slowly earning the rancher's trust. He allowed her to help with chores, showing her how to feed the animals, mend fences, and carry water. At first, her hands were clumsy, her movements uncertain, but he guided her patiently, correcting mistakes gently, without anger or frustration. In these moments, she realized that love could also be a form of teaching. To guide someone with patience, to help them grow without scolding or pushing too hard, was another way of showing care. During their time together, they began to share stories. The young Apache woman spoke of her family, of her traditions, and of the lessons she had learned from elders in her community. She spoke of the importance of respect for the land, of the ways love was shown in her culture, through protection, through food shared with others, and through stories passed down to the young. The rancher listened quietly, nodding, sometimes asking questions, showing genuine interest in her world. In turn, he shared small pieces of his own history, of his family, of the hardships and joys of ranch life. The young woman began to see that love, while expressed differently in each culture, carried a common thread. It was about care, responsibility, and connection. As the sun moved higher in the sky each day, their bond deepened. They shared meals, prepared together from simple ingredients, laughing at small mistakes, and enjoying the warmth of companionship. She noticed how he treated neighbors and strangers with kindness, always willing to lend a hand, showing that love extended beyond the home, beyond family and friends, into the community. She began to understand that love could be quiet, patient, and practical, and yet still deeply meaningful. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the young woman and the rancher sat outside the barn, watching the animals settle for the night. The rancher finally spoke, answering her question in his own way. "Love," he said slowly, "isn't always about saying words. It's about what you do every day. It's in the care you give, the patience you keep, the trust you show. If you do these things, love will be seen, even if it is quiet." The young Apache woman listened carefully, her heart opening to a new understanding. She realized that what she had asked for could not be taught in a single moment or through a single lesson. It was learned through life, through shared experiences, through watching and participating in acts of care. And in that moment she felt a deep respect for the rancher, not just for his kindness, but for the quiet strength that allowed him to love steadily and patiently, without needing recognition or applause. Night fell, and the stars emerged over the wide plains. The young woman returned to her own community, carrying the lessons she had learned with her. She thought about the rancher and the quiet ways he showed love, understanding now that it was not about how loudly it could be expressed, but about how deeply it could be felt. She felt a growing curiosity and determination to learn more, to understand love in all its forms, and to see how it could bridge the differences between people, cultures, and worlds. Over the following weeks, she continued to visit the ranch. Each day brought new lessons, new moments of connection, and new understanding. She began to see patterns in his actions, small gestures repeated with consistency that revealed the kind of love that was strong and enduring. The rancher, in turn, began to recognize her curiosity and respect, realizing that teaching her these lessons was not just about showing care, but about forming a bond that transcended differences in culture, language, and upbringing. By the end of the first part of their journey together, the young Apache woman had learned something profound. She had learned that love could be quiet and unassuming, that it could be expressed through responsibility, patience, and care, and that it could bridge gaps between people with different worlds and traditions. The rancher had begun to understand that love could also be shared through teaching, through sharing one's life and one's values with someone willing to learn. And in that shared understanding, a foundation was laid, a foundation for trust, respect, and connection that would grow deeper in the days to come. In the soft glow of the morning light, with the ranch stretching wide around them, two people from different worlds began to understand each other in a way that words alone could never explain. The young Apache woman, filled with curiosity and hope, had asked for a glimpse of love in a new world, and the rancher, with patience and quiet strength, had begun to teach her, not through speeches or lectures, but through the living, breathing examples of everyday life. And in this simple, gentle way, their story of understanding and connection began, one careful, meaningful step at a time. The days passed slowly, but each day was full of small, meaningful lessons. The young Apache woman began to rise early, just as the sun peeked over the horizon, and she would walk carefully across the dry plains to the ranch. The morning air was crisp and smelled faintly of sagebrush and earth. The sound of the wind through the grasses, the distant caw of a crow, and the soft rustle of the animals made the world feel alive and quiet at the same time. Each step she took was purposeful, not just to reach the ranch, but to immerse herself in the life she had come to watch and learn from. The rancher greeted her each morning with a nod and a calm smile. Words were not always necessary between them. Sometimes a simple gesture, like a tilt of the head or a brief glance, was enough to convey welcome. The young woman had learned that love, as he showed it, did not always need to be spoken. It was in the actions, the attention, and the care he took with everything around him. The rancher began teaching her the small routines that defined each day on the ranch. She learned how to feed the chickens, scattering grain carefully so each bird had enough, and how to check the water barrels to ensure none of the animals went thirsty. She learned to sweep the barn, noticing the importance of keeping spaces clean not just for the humans who lived there, but for the animals who shared the land. Each chore seemed simple at first, but the rancher showed her how to do them with thoughtfulness and patience, demonstrating that even the smallest acts could be expressions of care. At first, her hands were clumsy. She spilled water while filling the troughs, dropped hay as she fed the horses, and tripped over small rocks in the yard. But the rancher never scolded her. Instead, he guided her gently, showing her the right way to lift, pour, and carry. When she stumbled, he would say quietly, "It's all right. Take your time. Watch carefully." And in those words, she could feel the quiet patience behind them, a kind of love that asked for effort but never demanded perfection. Sometimes he would allow her to participate in the work more fully, letting her carry water to the animals or feed the horses under his careful supervision. At first, it was exhausting, and she would sit on the steps of the barn, wiping sweat from her brow and wondering how anyone could do this every day. But the rancher would sit beside her for a moment, sharing a quiet word, a small laugh, or a story about the animals they cared for. In these moments, she began to see that love could be steady and consistent, not hurried or forced. It was a rhythm, a daily commitment, and it could grow stronger with practice. As the young woman became more comfortable with the chores, she began to notice more subtle ways the rancher expressed care. He would talk to the animals softly, not to train them or order them around, but simply as if they could understand. He would rub a horse's mane or stroke a chicken's feathers gently, showing that his touch was not just functional but affectionate. He treated every living creature with respect, and she began to realize that this was part of the kind of love he carried, a love that did not separate humans from nature but saw all life as deserving of care. Their days together also became a time for conversation, slowly moving beyond work. The young Apache woman shared stories from her childhood, tales of her family, of ceremonies, of the ways her people honored the land and one another. She spoke of the importance of community, of helping each other, and of teaching the young to respect and protect the world around them. The rancher listened attentively, asking gentle questions, sometimes nodding, sometimes pausing to reflect. His curiosity was quiet but genuine. He did not interrupt or judge. He simply listened. And in listening, he showed another form of love, respect for her experiences, and a willingness to learn from her world as she learned from his. In return, the rancher began to share small pieces of his own life. He spoke of his early days on the ranch, of his family, and of the struggles and joys of working the land. He told her about his parents and the lessons they had taught him, and about the friends and neighbors who had helped him along the way. These stories were not grand or dramatic. They were ordinary, full of small details that revealed care, responsibility, and the bonds between people. And as the young woman listened, she began to understand that love could also be found in stories, in shared history, and in the memories people carried with them. One afternoon, the young woman noticed the rancher repairing a broken fence along the edge of the pasture. The wooden planks were old and splintered, and the task was hard work. She asked if she could help, and he handed her a hammer and some nails, showing her how to drive each one carefully. Together they worked in silence, their hands moving steadily, their eyes occasionally meeting with quiet acknowledgement. She realized then that love could also be found in teamwork, in the willingness to work side by side, supporting each other through effort and shared responsibility. As weeks turned into months, a routine developed. The young Apache woman and the rancher rose with the sun, worked together through the day, and shared quiet evenings. They ate simple meals, cornbread, stew, fresh vegetables from the garden, and laughed together when mistakes were made or when animals caused trouble. Slowly, the young woman began to understand that love was not always about dramatic gestures or words of affection. It could be quiet, steady, and practical, expressed through patience, responsibility, and the willingness to share one's life with another. During these months, she also observed how the rancher treated others in the community. He was always willing to help neighbors, offering tools, labor, or advice when needed. He visited people who were sick or elderly, bringing food or simple gifts, never expecting thanks but giving care freely. The young woman began to see that love could extend beyond the home, beyond family and friends, and into the wider world. It could be expressed in acts of kindness, in generosity, and in the quiet commitment to help others without seeking reward. There were also moments of quiet reflection. The two of them would sit outside as the sun set, watching the colors of the sky change from gold to orange to deep purple. The young woman would think about her own life and the lessons she had learned from her family and community. She compared these lessons to what she was learning from the rancher, noticing both the differences and the similarities. Love, she realized, was universal in its core, even if it was expressed differently in different places. It was in care, in attention, in patience, and in the willingness to give without expecting anything in return. Occasionally, challenges arose. There were days when the weather was harsh, when chores were especially difficult, or when misunderstandings happened between the two of them. The young woman sometimes felt frustrated when she could not keep up with the work, and the rancher felt frustrated when he could not always explain his methods. But even in these moments, love showed itself. They learned to forgive mistakes, to be patient with one another, and to continue working together. Each challenge became a lesson, each difficulty a way to strengthen their understanding and their bond. As spring approached, the land began to bloom with new life. Flowers grew along the fences, the grass turned green again, and the animals thrived under their care. The young Apache woman noticed that her own heart had grown in new ways as well. She felt a quiet strength and confidence that came from learning, from working, and from understanding love through action. She had come to the ranch curious about the ways of white people, and she had discovered that love could be shown in simple, meaningful acts every day. It was in feeding the animals, in repairing fences, in sharing stories, and in being present with someone through all of life's small moments. One evening, as they watched the last rays of sunlight fade behind the hills, the rancher turned to her and spoke softly. "You've learned well," he said. "Not just how to care for the land, but how to see the world, how to notice the small things that matter. That's how love grows." The young Apache woman smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She realized that she had not just been learning about love from the rancher, but also about life itself, the patience, care, and attention required to truly connect with the world and the people in it. She felt a deep respect for him, not only for what he taught, but for the way he lived. Steady, kind, and full of quiet love that did not need to be spoken to be understood. By the end of this part of her journey, the young Apache woman had grown more confident, more patient, and more aware of the world around her. She understood that love was not a simple answer, not a single act, but a pattern of living with care and respect. And she knew that in the days to come, she would continue to learn, to observe, and to grow, carrying these lessons with her as she experienced more of life and the quiet, steady love that had begun to shape her heart. As the young Apache woman continued her visits to the ranch, she and the rancher had grown closer. Their days were filled with work, stories, and quiet companionship. Yet, as often happens in life, not everything was smooth or easy. Differences between their worlds began to surface, subtle at first, but increasingly noticeable. It became clear that learning to understand love also meant learning to navigate misunderstandings and challenges. One morning, the young woman arrived at the ranch to find the rancher already outside feeding the animals. She carried a basket of eggs she had collected from nearby chickens, intending to help. As she stepped onto the yard, a loud clatter startled her. A chicken had knocked over a bucket. The rancher sighed quietly, moving to set the bucket upright. "Careful," he said, his voice calm but firm. She nodded, trying to steady her hands, but immediately dropped an egg. The rancher glanced at the cracked egg and then at her face. She felt a flash of embarrassment and quickly apologized. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice low. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," he replied, though she sensed a hint of frustration in his tone. "Just pay attention. That's all." She felt a twinge of hurt, though she knew he had not meant to be unkind. Still, she began to realize that communication between them was not always simple. His words were often brief, practical, and straightforward. In her own community, mistakes were often met with stories, gentle advice, or longer explanations. Here, corrections were given quickly and without much explanation, leaving her to figure out the meaning on her own. At first, she felt unsure if this was a form of love or simply instruction. Later that day, while they repaired a fence damaged by a recent storm, a neighbor came by to offer advice. The neighbor, a man from the town nearby, commented on the unusual friendship between the young Apache woman and the rancher. "It's strange, isn't it?" he said, his tone curious and slightly judgmental. "People from different worlds don't usually get along like that." The young woman felt a sharp pang of confusion. She looked at the rancher, who simply nodded politely to the neighbor, saying nothing more. She realized that their bond might be misunderstood by others, and that brought a new layer of complexity to her learning. Love, she began to see, was not only about actions and patience. It was also about understanding the reactions of those around you, navigating the judgments and expectations of the wider world. As the days went on, small misunderstandings continued to appear. The young woman sometimes misread the rancher's intentions. When he spoke briefly or gave instructions without elaboration, she occasionally felt coldness where there was none. Likewise, he sometimes misread her expressions or silence as uncertainty or lack of effort, when in reality she was processing, learning, and observing. These moments were frustrating, and at times both felt a quiet tension between them. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of repairing fences and tending to the animals, the young woman dropped a basket of tools in the corral. The clatter startled the horse, which reared slightly. The rancher moved quickly to calm the animal and protect her, his voice sharp for the first time in weeks. "Careful," he said, more forcefully than usual. The young woman felt tears prick at her eyes. She had tried so hard, yet it seemed she could never get everything right. She looked down at the tools, at the frightened horse, and then at the rancher, unsure what he was thinking. He, in turn, noticed her expression and softened immediately. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said gently. I want you to be safe. That's all." In that moment, she understood that love sometimes meant worry and concern, even if it came across as anger or frustration. It was not a lack of care, but rather a deep desire to protect and guide. She nodded, wiping her eyes, and together they calmed the horse and continued their work, a silent understanding passing between them. The challenges were not only practical but emotional as well. There were days when the young woman missed her family, when memories of home and tradition made her feel lonely on the ranch. She would watch the sunset, thinking of her parents, siblings, and the elders who had taught her so much. The rancher noticed these moments and, in his quiet way, offered comfort. Sometimes it was a kind word, sometimes it was sharing a simple meal, or sitting with her in silence. Slowly she realized that love could also be shown in presence, being there for someone without forcing conversation or action, simply offering support through quiet companionship. One day a misunderstanding arose that tested their growing bond. The young woman had prepared a small meal for them, a mixture of vegetables, bread, and stew she had learned to make from observing the rancher. She had tried to add her own touch, incorporating herbs from her community. When the rancher tasted it, his face showed surprise, and he frowned slightly. "It's different," he said, unsure how to express his thoughts without discouraging her. The young woman felt a pang of disappointment. She had hoped he would appreciate the effort and the gesture of care. She looked down at the food, feeling embarrassed, and quietly moved to clear the table. The rancher noticed her reaction and quickly added, "I didn't mean it badly. It's just different from what I'm used to. But I can see the care you put into it, and that matters more than anything." She looked up, relief washing over her. She realized that love, as he demonstrated it, was not about perfection or meeting expectations. It was about effort, thoughtfulness, and intention. Even when mistakes were made, even when tastes or methods differed, the underlying care remained the most important thing. As the weeks continued, they faced more challenges together. There were storms that damaged fences and barns, requiring long hours of repair. There were sick animals that needed extra attention and care. Each challenge was an opportunity for the young woman to learn, not just about work or survival, but about patience, compassion, and resilience. She saw how the rancher handled difficulties with calm determination, never giving up and always thinking of the well-being of others first. Through these experiences, she learned that love often required effort and sacrifice, sometimes in ways that were invisible to outsiders. There were also moments of misunderstanding, born from cultural differences. The young woman sometimes struggled to express gratitude in ways the rancher immediately understood, and he sometimes struggled to explain his intentions in ways she could easily grasp. They learned to communicate more clearly, to ask questions when unsure, and to listen carefully to each other's words and gestures. Slowly, they discovered that love was not just about actions. It was also about learning to understand and respect the perspectives of another person. One evening, after a particularly long day, they sat outside the barn watching the stars emerge in the night sky. The young woman spoke softly, sharing her thoughts about the challenges she had faced and the lessons she had learned. She admitted that at times she had felt frustrated, lonely, and unsure. The rancher listened without interrupting, nodding gently, and then offered his own reflections. He spoke about the difficulties he had faced in his own life, about times when patience had been tested, and about how he had learned that love often required understanding and forgiveness. In that quiet moment, the young woman realized that love was not always easy or straightforward. It was messy at times, filled with misunderstandings, mistakes, and moments of frustration. But it was also rewarding, teaching patience, empathy, and connection. She saw that the rancher's love, quiet and steadfast, had a depth that went beyond words or gestures. It was lived every day, in both ordinary and challenging moments. As the night deepened, they walked slowly back to the house, their steps side by side. The young woman felt a growing sense of trust and respect for the rancher, and he felt a similar respect for her resilience, curiosity, and willingness to learn. They had faced challenges together, navigated misunderstandings, and still found ways to connect, understand, and care for one another. In these experiences, they discovered the strength of love, not the easy, simple kind, but the enduring, patient, and real kind that grows through effort, understanding, and shared life. By the end of this part of the journey, the young Apache woman had learned that love was not simply about admiration or desire. It was about patience, resilience, understanding, and the willingness to work through difficulties together. She realized that even when misunderstandings arose, even when challenges made her doubt herself, the care and attention behind actions were what truly mattered. And the rancher, too, had learned that teaching love, sharing life, and guiding another person required empathy, clarity, and openness. Together, they were growing in understanding, laying the foundation for a bond that could endure differences, challenges, and the tests of life itself. Spring had fully arrived, and the ranch was alive with new energy. The fields were green, flowers dotted the edges of the pastures, and the animals moved with renewed vigor. The young Apache woman arrived one morning with a lightness in her step, though she carried with her an awareness that life could be both beautiful and challenging. She had learned much in the months since she had first come to the ranch, but she also knew there were deeper lessons to discover. Lessons that could only be learned through trust, shared experiences, and moments of vulnerability. That morning, she found the rancher in the barn mending a torn canvas that covered part of the feed storage. His hands were rough and steady, moving with skill and patience. As she approached, a sudden sound of distress came from the corral. One of the horses, a young mare, had caught her hoof in a loose section of fencing. The mare was panicking, stamping and pulling at the fence. The young woman's heart raced as she ran toward the animal, fear and worry filling her chest. The rancher was already moving, calming the horse with gentle words and careful hands. "Stay calm," he called to her. "Help me slowly. We must not frighten her more." She nodded, taking a deep breath and following his instructions. Together they worked carefully, her hands trembling as she held the fence steady while he freed the mare's hoof. The moment was tense, filled with fear and uncertainty, but it was also a turning point. In their shared concern and effort, they began to understand the depth of care that went beyond words. After the mare was safely freed, she sank to the ground, exhausted and shaken. The rancher knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said softly. "You stayed calm and helped. That shows strength." She looked up at him, tears in her eyes, and felt a warmth spread through her chest. In that moment, she realized that vulnerability was not weakness. Showing fear, worry, or uncertainty could be met with patience, understanding, and support. And this was another form of love. In the following days, the young Apache woman began to open herself more fully, sharing thoughts and feelings she had kept to herself. She spoke of her fears, of not being understood, of failing, of the possibility that she might never fully belong in either her own community.
"Where is this new world?"
The rancher listened without judgment, offering gentle words and quiet presence. Sometimes he did not speak at all, simply sitting beside her, letting her feel heard and supported. She learned that love could be expressed through presence, through patience, and through willingness to sit with someone in their struggles without rushing to fix them. One afternoon, as they worked in the garden planting vegetables for the coming summer, the young woman spoke of a memory from her childhood. She told the rancher about a time when a storm had damaged her family's crops, and how her parents and elders had worked together to save what they could. She spoke of fear, frustration, and resilience, of the way love had shown itself in action, not in words. The rancher listened, nodding, occasionally offering a quiet question or comment to show he was engaged. The young woman realized that through sharing memories, they were building a bond that was based on trust and understanding, not just daily routines. That evening, as the sun sank low, they took a break and sat on a wooden bench outside the barn. The sky was painted with gold, orange, and purple hues, and the soft sounds of animals settling in for the night created a peaceful backdrop. The young woman felt a mix of gratitude, curiosity, and affection for the rancher. "I never knew love could be so quiet," she said softly. "I used to think it had to be spoken, shown loudly. But you've shown me that it can be in actions, in patience, in care." The rancher smiled gently. "Love is not always loud," he replied. "It is steady, consistent, and often hidden in the small things we do. The world is full of noise, but real love is quiet. You notice it when you pay attention, when you are willing to see it." As the days went by, a new closeness developed. They shared more than work. They shared dreams, hopes, and even fears. The young woman spoke of her desire to learn, to grow, and to bring what she had learned back to her community. The rancher spoke of his own hopes, of the satisfaction he found in caring for the land, the animals, and those around him. Their conversations were open and honest, marked by mutual respect and growing trust. One afternoon, a sudden illness struck one of the rancher's animals. A young calf became weak and unresponsive. The young Apache woman felt panic rise in her chest, but the rancher remained calm. Together they worked to care for the calf, giving it water, warmth, and attention. Hours passed, and she began to understand the true weight of responsibility and love. Caring for another living being was not always easy, and it required courage, patience, and dedication. By the time the calf began to respond, her respect for the rancher's quiet strength deepened even more. Through these shared experiences, their bond grew stronger. The young woman realized that vulnerability, acknowledging fear, admitting uncertainty, and seeking help, was an essential part of learning to love and be loved. The rancher, too, began to recognize that sharing moments of care, worry, and effort could bring them closer, building trust that words alone could not achieve. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat outside under a sky full of stars. The young woman spoke softly, her voice filled with curiosity and reflection. I see now that love is not just about what we say or even what we do. It's about being present, being patient, and being willing to care, even when it's hard." The rancher nodded. "Yes. Love is often quiet, steady, and strong. It is in the effort we put in every day, the patience we show, and the understanding we offer. Sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most meaning." The young woman looked at him, realizing that she had come to the ranch seeking knowledge about love, but she had found something deeper, a model for living with care, respect, and patience. She understood that love was not a single act or a single lesson. It was a pattern of life, woven into the choices and actions one made each day. Over the next weeks, they faced more shared challenges, from caring for injured animals to repairing fences damaged by storms. Each challenge required collaboration, patience, and trust. The young woman learned to rely on the rancher's guidance while also trusting her own judgment. The rancher, in turn, learned to recognize her growing confidence and ability to act with care and understanding. Their bond became a partnership, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. During one quiet evening, the young woman spoke of her fears about the future, about leaving the ranch, returning to her community, and applying what she had learned. The rancher listened intently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The lessons you've learned here are yours to carry wherever you go," he said. "Love is not tied to a place or a person. It is in what you do, how you care, and how you treat others. You have the strength to carry it with you." The young woman felt a wave of gratitude. She realized that the rancher had not only taught her about love, but had also shown her how to find courage and confidence within herself. Their shared vulnerability, moments of fear, worry, and honest expression, had created a bond that was deep, meaningful, and enduring. By the end of this part of their journey, the young Apache woman had grown in understanding, compassion, and patience. She had learned that love was not always easy or simple. It required courage, trust, and openness. She had seen that vulnerability was not weakness, but a path to deeper connection. And she had discovered that love could be quiet, steady, and enduring, expressed in actions, attention, and care, rather than in words alone. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky with warm colors, the young woman and the rancher sat side by side, watching the animals settle in for the night. The world felt calm and full of promise. They had faced challenges together, shared fears, and nurtured life with patience and care. In these quiet, meaningful moments, they understood each other in a way that went beyond words. Love, they realized, was not just something taught or learned. It was something lived, every day, in small acts of kindness, patience, and presence. And in that realization, both felt a quiet joy, knowing that their bond was growing stronger, built on trust, understanding, and the shared experience of life itself. They knew that the days to come would bring more challenges and lessons, but they also knew that together they could face anything, and that their understanding of love would continue to deepen, quietly and steadily, like the rhythm of the land itself. The summer sun had begun to climb high over the ranch, warming the plains and casting golden light over the fields, fences, and animals. The young Apache woman arrived early, as she always did, carrying with her a quiet sense of anticipation. Over the months, she had learned so much from the rancher, not just about work or animals, but about life, patience, care, and love. Yet she knew this summer would be different. She felt a growing awareness that the time she had spent here had changed her, and that she would soon carry the lessons she had learned into the wider world. That morning, the rancher was outside, tending to the horses in the corral. The air was filled with the sounds of clattering hooves, gentle neighs, and the rustle of wind through the grasses. As she approached, he looked up, smiling, and gestured for her to come closer. There was a warmth in his eyes that seemed to say they had both traveled a long journey together, not only through work and routines, but through understanding, trust, and shared experience.
"Good morning," she said softly, a hint of excitement in her voice.
"I feel different today." "I think I understand more about what you've been trying to show me." He nodded slowly. "And what is it that you understand?" he asked, genuinely curious, though his tone was gentle. She paused for a moment, searching for the right words. "I understand that love is not just about words or moments of passion," she said. "It's about the small things we do every day. It's about patience, care, respect, and being willing to be there for someone or something, even when it's hard. It's about living with kindness, in work, in attention, in every small action." The rancher smiled, feeling a quiet pride and satisfaction. "You've learned well," he said. "That is exactly what I hoped you would see. Love is not always loud, but it is steady, enduring, and meaningful. And it can be shared in so many ways, with people, animals, and even the land itself." That day they worked together tending the garden, repairing fences, and caring for the animals. The young Apache woman moved with confidence, her hands steady, her actions deliberate. She had grown strong, both physically and emotionally, through the months of shared work and learning. She noticed how her understanding of love had deepened, how she could see the care and attention behind every small gesture the rancher made, and how she could now carry that care forward in her own actions. Later in the afternoon, a neighbor came by, bringing news of a nearby family in need of assistance. The rancher and the young woman immediately agreed to help. Together they loaded a wagon with supplies, tools, and food, traveling across the plains to reach the family. Along the way they spoke little, letting their actions and cooperation communicate their intentions. The young woman realized that love, as the rancher had shown her, extended beyond the ranch, beyond family and immediate connections, into the community. It was expressed through service, kindness, and willingness to care for others without expectation. When they arrived at the family's home, the young woman took the lead in assisting with chores, helping to repair a broken fence and tending to the family's animals. She noticed the way the rancher observed her, nodding occasionally, offering guidance when needed, but allowing her to act and grow. In that moment, she understood another important lesson, that love could also mean giving space for someone else to shine, to learn, and to act independently while knowing they were supported. By evening, they returned to the ranch, tired but fulfilled. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the fields, and the animals settled quietly in their pens. The young woman and the rancher sat on the steps of the barn, enjoying a simple meal together. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with shared understanding and mutual respect. She thought about the months they had spent together, the work, the stories, the challenges, and the moments of quiet connection. She realized how much she had grown, not only in skill and knowledge, but in heart and spirit. The rancher spoke softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "You've learned more than you realize," he said. "You've learned to see love in action, to understand responsibility, patience, and care. And you've learned to trust yourself in how you express it." The young woman smiled. "I feel ready now," she said. "I think I can carry this knowledge back to my community, to show them that love can take many forms, that it doesn't have to be loud or dramatic to be real." The rancher nodded. "That's the most important lesson," he said. "Love grows when it is shared, and when you take what you've learned and give it to others, you make it even stronger." In the days that followed, they continued their routines, but there was a new sense of ease and mutual respect between them. The young woman's confidence had grown, and the rancher recognized that she no longer needed constant guidance. Their partnership had become one of equals, bonded by trust, understanding, and shared experience. They had faced challenges together, navigated misunderstandings, and learned to be vulnerable with one another. In doing so, they had discovered a deeper, more enduring form of love. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues over the plains, the young Apache woman sat beside the rancher, watching the horizon. She reflected on how far she had come, from the first day when she had asked him to show her love, to now when she felt capable of understanding and practicing it herself. She thought about the quiet strength, patience, and care he had demonstrated, and how it had shaped her understanding of the world and herself. "You've taught me so much," she said softly. "Not just about love, but about life, responsibility, and trust. I will never forget it." The rancher looked at her, his expression gentle. "And you've taught me something as well," he replied. "You've reminded me that love can be shared openly, and that it can grow stronger when it is seen through another's eyes. You've brought curiosity, courage, and respect to every moment. That is a gift. As night fell, they stood together outside the barn, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Stars dotted the sky, and the air was filled with the faint scent of grass, earth, and distant flowers. In that moment, both felt a quiet joy and fulfillment. The young Apache woman knew that her understanding of love had transformed, becoming richer and deeper. The rancher knew that his efforts to teach and share had borne fruit, and that their bond had become a lasting connection built on trust, respect, and care. The following morning, she prepared to leave the ranch for a short visit to her family, carrying with her the lessons she had learned. She packed carefully, thinking about the things she would share, how to show love through actions, patience, care, and respect. As she stood at the edge of the ranch, ready to depart, the rancher approached. "Remember," he said gently, "love is in the small things, in care, in patience, in consistency. Take it with you and share it. That is how it grows." She nodded, a smile on her face, feeling gratitude and warmth fill her chest. "I will," she said. "Thank you for everything." With that, she walked across the plains toward her home, carrying the quiet lessons of love and life with her. She knew that her journey was far from over, but that she was ready to face the world with a new understanding, a deeper heart, and a commitment to live with care and kindness. Back at the ranch, the rancher watched her disappear into the distance. He felt a sense of pride and contentment, knowing that he had helped guide someone toward understanding something profound. But he also knew that the lessons had been mutual, that he had learned as much from her courage, curiosity, and openness as she had from him. In that understanding, he felt a quiet joy, knowing that love in all its quiet, steady forms had been shared and understood. In the days that followed, the young Apache woman returned to the ranch several times, each visit strengthening their bond and reinforcing the lessons they had learned together. The community began to notice the changes in her, the patience, the care, and the quiet confidence she carried. She shared what she had learned about love through her actions, her attention to detail, and her compassion for others. Slowly, she became a bridge between her community and the lessons she had learned on the ranch, showing that love could transcend differences in culture, background, and experience. The rancher, too, continued his quiet life, tending to the land, the animals, and the people around him. But now he did so with a renewed sense of connection, knowing that his patient guidance had made a difference, that the quiet acts of care he had performed daily had been seen, appreciated, and understood. And in that knowledge he found a deep sense of fulfillment and peace. By the end of this story, both the young Apache woman and the rancher had been transformed, not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through months of shared experience, patience, vulnerability, and quiet, steady love. They had learned that love was not a single moment, but a way of living, a pattern of actions and attention that could bridge worlds, cultures, and hearts. And they both knew that the lessons they had shared would continue to ripple outward, shaping lives, relationships, and understanding for years to come. As the sun set on the plains, painting the sky with its warm colors, they stood together for a final moment of reflection. The young woman felt ready to carry the lessons of love into her own world, and the rancher felt proud to have shared them. In the quiet beauty of that evening, they understood that love, patience, care, and trust were the true foundation of life, and that they had both discovered it in its most enduring, meaningful form.